Builders think in structure, trajectory, and long-term gain. Chronic rebels think in escape, autonomy, and emotional self-protection. These value systems don't collide immediately. At first, they create attraction. You want consistency. She wants freedom. You want to build together. She wants to prove she doesn't need anyone. Over time, you become the closest structure in her life. And unresolved rebellion always pushes against structure. That's when attraction quietly turns into opposition. Not because you did anything wrong, but because stability activates the very thing she's still fighting against from her past. She's not rebelling against you. She's rebelling against a version of her life she never resolved. And if you stay long enough, you become the symbol of what she fears losing control to, which leads directly to the next risk. Why attention itself can destabilize intimacy. Risk number 3 isn't emotional, it's environmental. Visibility creates noise. Tattoos don't exist quietly. They draw eyes, comments, curiosity. Doors open that would otherwise stay closed. For some women, that attention is neutral. For others, it becomes regulation, how their nervous system stays balanced. Here's what most men underestimate. When attention becomes a steady background presence, intimacy competes with an audience. Even if boundaries are never crossed, the psychological noise never turns off. Dark psychology calls this validation conditioning. If attention equals aliveness, then silence feels like absence. When external feedback fades, discomfort rises, and unconsciously the system seeks more stimulation. This isn't jealousy, it's energy economics. A grounded woman enjoys attention without needing it. An ungrounded one feels unsettled when it disappears. Over time, being chosen by one man feels less nourishing than being noticed by many. You begin sensing something subtle but important. Her nervous system lights up more in public than in private. And that creates a silent imbalance, because intimacy thrives in depth, not exposure. So here's the question you must ask yourself. Does she value connection or visibility? Because one builds a bond, the other builds momentum away from you. And the next risk explains why peace itself can start to feel threatening. Risk number 4 is where good men get confused. When chaos feels safer than peace, some nervous systems don't just survive turmoil, they adapt to it. When emotional intensity has been constant, calm starts feeling wrong. Not boring, wrong. This is trauma familiarity. In dark psychology, the nervous system doesn't seek what's healthy. It seeks what's familiar. If love once meant unpredictability, conflict, or emotional spikes, stability registers as emptiness. At first you feel refreshing, safe, different. Then something shifts. Your consistency becomes boring. Your regulation feels flat. Your peace lacks chemistry, not because it's unhealthy, but because it doesn't activate adrenaline. This is the pattern. Chaos creates intensity. Intensity creates attachment. Attachment creates damage. Damage reinforces the belief that love hurts. So when a man arrives who doesn't hurt her, he doesn't fit the script. Here's the warning most men ignore. You cannot outlove a trauma pattern. If she's bonded to emotional turbulence, stability will eventually feel like suffocation. And when that happens, you become the man who did everything right and still got rejected. Not because you failed, but because your peace couldn't compete with her conditioning. And the next risk explains why commitment collapses when identity never settles. Risk number 5 hides behind the word growth. Identity instability. Reinvention isn't the problem. Endless reinvention is. Some people don't grow forward, they reset. Every time discomfort appears, identity changes. New values, new aesthetics, new direction. Each version feels real in the moment, but none last long enough to build anything durable. Early on, this feels exciting. Unpredictability creates intrigue. You feel like you're with someone dynamic. Then the whiplash begins. Plans feel risky. Promises feel temporary. The future feels undefined. Dark psychology draws a sharp line here. Healthy growth maintains continuity. You evolve without abandoning your foundation. Unstable identity abandons structure whenever tension appears. This is where men betray themselves quietly. They downplay their need for consistency. They call stability boring. They convince themselves adapting is maturity. But adaptation without reciprocity erodes you. You can't commit to someone who's still experimenting with who they are. Waiting for identity to settle isn't patience, it's gambling. And tattoos in this context aren't the cause. They're the clue. Signals that reinvention may be used as escape instead of integration, which leads directly into the next risk. Why her social circle eventually becomes your psychological environment. Risk number 6 is the one most men ignore completely. You think you're choosing a woman. You're actually entering an ecosystem. Her social circle isn't background noise, it's a psychological environment. And environments shape behavior faster than intention ever will. Dark psychology calls this social reinforcement. If her closest friends normalize chaos, grievance, and emotional volatility, those patterns become justified, not because she's weak, but because humans are wired to belong. Here's how it plays out. You start as the calm center, the grounded one, the exception. Then outside voices seep in, small doubts, subtle narratives, conflicts that never existed suddenly need processing. Advice. That sounds supportive quietly, undermines stability. You didn't change. The environment did. Watch what her circle celebrates. Accountability or victimhood. Growth or endless drama. Stability or excitement at any cost. Those values don't stay external. They enter the relationship through validation and alignment. This is the brutal truth many men learn too late. You can be emotionally healthy and still lose a relationship if the surrounding environment is toxic. Love doesn't operate in isolation. And the next risk explains why. Even with patience and effort, intimacy may never fully form. Risk number 7 is disguised as confidence. Ink as armor. Not all protection looks defensive. Sometimes it looks expressive. For certain women, tattoos aren't just art. They're control over perception. Decide how the world sees me before it gets close enough to hurt me. When self-worth is fragile, visibility feels safer than vulnerability. You'll notice it in patterns. Compliments get deflected. Emotional closeness triggers distance. Consistency is met with withdrawal. This isn't manipulation, it's defense. Dark psychology is clear here. Armor blocks pain, but it also blocks intimacy. You can't build closeness where defenses never lower. This is where men unknowingly slip into a losing role. They become the supporter, the fixer, the validator. They give more patience, more reassurance, more emotional labor, hoping safety will heal what's broken. Here's the boundary. Support is healthy, rescue is not. If she doesn't believe she's worthy of love, she'll only borrow your validation temporarily. Eventually, needing it becomes uncomfortable or worse, resentful. You can walk beside someone doing the work. You cannot carry someone avoiding themselves. And the next risk reveals how impulsivity hides behind the word authentic. Risk number 8 is one of the most seductive lies in modern dating. Impulsivity disguised as authenticity. You've heard it before, I'm just being real. But dark psychology makes a sharper distinction. Acting on emotion isn't authenticity, it's appetite. Many tattoos are chosen during emotional spikes, highs, lows, identity shifts, moments driven by dopamine, not deliberation. Again, not immoral, but revealing. Here's why it matters. Impulsive decision makers optimize for relief, excitement, or intensity now. Principled decision makers optimize for outcomes later. When boredom hits, when attraction fluctuates, when life becomes repetitive as it always does, impulsivity doesn't solve problems. It escapes them. This is where freedom gets misdefined. Real freedom includes restraint, the ability to pause, reflect, choose alignment over stimulation. Watch patterns, not explanations. When discomfort appears, does she work through it or run from it? When emotions dip, does she build or seek novelty? Because a man who builds intentionally will always struggle with a partner who lives reactively. Spontaneity adds color, but when impulse replaces principle, commitment becomes fragile. And fragility doesn't disappear with time, it just waits for pressure. Risk number 9 through 11 collapse into one final realization. Most men only reach after it's over. You may not be the destination. You may be the reset. Here's how it happens. She enters your life exhausted after chaos, instability, emotional burnout. Compared to her past, you feel like relief, calm, safety, peace, and that feels powerful at first. But peace is not the same as readiness. Dark psychology calls this peace allergy. When someone is wired by chaos, but temporarily tired of it, stability feels good but unfamiliar. Over time, unfamiliar starts feeling empty, and empty starts calling old patterns back. This is where tattoos become data, not decoration. Studies highlight clustering signals, number, size, visibility, and darker imagery, not as guarantees, but probabilities of prolonged identity struggle rather than integration. You weren't chosen because she was ready to build. You were chosen because she needed to rest. And when her nervous system recovered, the storm started calling again. Here's the final truth you must internalize. You cannot become an anchor for someone who still lives for the waves. You can offer stability, but you cannot make it satisfying to someone who hasn't learned how to live inside it. This video was never about judging women. It was about discernment. Tattoos aren't a sentence. They're signals. And ignoring signals doesn't make you open-minded. It makes you unprepared. You're allowed to want peace. You're allowed to want consistency. You're allowed to choose a partner whose nervous system doesn't need destruction to feel alive. That isn't fear. That's self-respect. The strongest men aren't the ones who endure the most chaos. They're the ones who recognize misalignment early and walk away before it. Cost their future. If this made you uncomfortable, good. That's where clarity begins. Like, subscribe and comment. What part hit hardest?